Morning. The subcommittee will come to order. Thank you all for being here. Before I begin the prepared remarks, I'd like to thank the Colgan family for once again being here, for so many of them being so strong in their continued dedication and commitment to enduring aviation safety. So thank you very much. Today, the Aviation Subcommittee is holding its third hearing in preparation for the upcoming FAA authorization bill. As all of you know, the focus of Transportation and Infrastructure Committee this year is building a 21st century infrastructure for America. Today, we will be looking at the current state of our nation's air transportation system and those who operate in it. We will also learn what those operators believe are needed for the system to move into the future. And we also want to learn from those in the public in the days ahead. We have created a dedicated email address to receive your ideas and welcome them very much. It is transportfeedback@mail.house.gov. transportfeedback@mail.house.gov. Please send us your ideas. Air transportation has become so commonplace that we really don't think about what an impact it has on our daily lives. Journeys that once took days, weeks, or even months are now safely completed in hours. We can order something online and have it delivered the next day. Today, air travel is routinely and readily available to millions of Americans. In fact, last year, more than 800 million passengers traveled by air within the United States, a figure that is projected to grow to 1 billion within 10 years. This remarkable system is a testament to the hard work of the pilots, flight attendants, mechanics, and others who take us safely across the country and around the world. Air transportation in the United States is diverse. Along with private aviation, it also includes mainline airlines, regionals, all-cargo airlines, and charter companies, each playing a vital role in meeting various needs of the traveling public and economy. Mainline airlines connect our major cities and also connect us to other countries. Regional airlines help connect many small and medium-sized communities to large hub airports, providing them access to the globe. For other communities and certain travelers, such as small business operators, charter service or fractional ownership may be the only viable air transport option. Cargo airlines allow for our factories and supply chain inventories to remain fully stocked and keep goods flowing between businesses to consumers. They also play a large role in e-commerce. Our panel today represents a range of air transportation companies and stakeholders. Each witness brings a unique expertise and perspective on the state of our system. I look forward to their testimony on how Congress can help facilitate the building of a 21st century aviation infrastructure. Before recognizing Ranking Member Larson for his remarks, I'd like to ask unanimous consent that the record of today's hearing remain open until such time as our witnesses have provided answers to any questions that may be submitted to them in writing, and unanimous consent that the record remain open for 15 additional days for comments and information submitted by members or witnesses to be included in the record of today's hearing. Without objection, so ordered. I'd now like to yield to Mr. Larson for any remarks he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and for calling today's hearing on the state of today's U.S. air transportation industry. I, too, would like to recognize the families of the passengers of Colgan Flight 3407 who are with us today. Welcome, and thank you for your tireless efforts to improve aviation safety. I also want to welcome to today's panel of witnesses Brad Tilden, the CEO of Seattle-based Alaska Airlines, and a fellow Loot. Brad and I know what that is. It's not necessary to explain it. U.S. airspace is the busiest and most complex in the world and is undergoing a historic shift in modernization in the form of FAA's NextGen program. Alaska Airlines has been a strong advocate for NextGen, which has delivered more than $2.7 billion in benefits to airlines and operators of GA aircraft and is expected to produce $13 billion in benefits for the government and users by 2020 and over $160 billion by 2030. I understand that NextGen's performance-based navigation, or PBN procedures, allow Alaska Airlines flights to fly more directly and precisely into Juneau each day, and the Greener Skies initiative improves efficiency of the airline's flights, its landings at SeaTac International Airport. So, Mr. Tilden, I look forward to hearing from you today about how the state-of-the-art next-gen technologies and procedures are improving efficiency in today's airspace and providing benefits for the aviation industry generally. Not only the busiest and most complex, the U.S. is the safest aviation system in the world, and I'd like to commend the FAA and all the industry witnesses here today and everyone involved in the air transportation system for their coordination and continued commitment to ensuring the highest level of safety. This laudable safety record of U.S. commercial airlines in recent years is due in large part to a 2010 congressional mandate that each airline pilot possesses an airline transportation certificate. And I personally support that. I believe that current pilot training requirements are non-negotiable. At the same time, though, I realize that some regional air carriers, among them, there is some concern about the shortage of pilots in this country. So earlier this week, Ranking Member DeFazio and I made a request to the Department of Transportation's Inspector General. At our request, the DOT Inspector General reported that some regional airlines have started increasing pay to attract additional pilots. That is a step in the right direction. I also look forward to hearing today from Ms. Sara Nelson from the Association of Flight Attendants. We're in the midst of the safest period in U.S. civil aviation history, thanks in large part to the hard work of U.S. flight attendants. Their training and readiness to spring into action have saved lives in dangerous accidents. Therefore, it's critical that flight attendants are well rested and that out-of-date federal regulations on flight attendants' flight and duty periods are reformed. Last year's long-term FAA bill, as reported by the committee, included such a provision, and I look forward to working with Chairman Lobiando to ensure its inclusion in the FAA bill this year. And today I'm pleased to join with Ranking Member DeFazio in introducing a bill to improve passengers' travel experience by requiring airlines to be more transparent about what they will do for passengers caught up in large-scale network meltdowns, among other things. We must continue to ensure that air travel experience is fair and devoid of discrimination. On this front, I was pleased to have included in last year's short-term bill a provision on air travel accessibility and look forward to hearing what more the subcommittee can do to improve passengers' travel experience. And finally, Mr. Chairman, I would ask for unanimous consent that written statements prepared by the Airline Pilots Association International and the Association of Professional Flight Attendants be entered into the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to the witness's testimony.
Now I'd like to recognize Mr. Schuster for any comments he may have.
Thank you, Chairman Lobiano. Let me start by echoing your thanks to the families, the Colgan families, for being here and your efforts to make sure that we have the safest possible system we can have. And so thank you very much for that dedication. I want to thank Chairman Lobiando and Ranking Member Larson again for this third in a series of hearings, the Aviation Subcommittee hearings, focusing on FAA reauthorization and building a 21st century aviation system for America. I look forward to discussing the state of the transportation industry, and it's a vital industry to America. It's one of our most important, one we invented, and it's for all my efforts is to continue to make sure that America leads the aviation industry in the world. Private air transportation plays an important role in our aviation system, connecting our smaller communities. I come from a rural community. It's vital that we have those connections. The general aviation also provides a tremendous training ground for potential future pilots to be able to go to work for the bigger carriers to make sure that we have the levels necessary to staff those planes and to continue to grow air transportation in this country. As I said, we have been a leader in it, and I want to maintain that leadership in the world. And we've done lots of things over the last 40 years, from low-cost carriers, fractional ownership, giving people more and more choices, how we get our tickets, whether it's an e-ticket, which I'm still not sure I know how to do, but I stumble along. It's true. I know what loot means too. That's what pirates used to do. But no, I stumble and bumble along with the technology, but having 20-year-old kids, they seem to get me to where I'm going, as well as Mr. Larson sometimes helps me. Again, in 2016, we took steps in the extension to help families sit together, things like that, that we thought would be helpful to the folks that are traveling in this country. 40 years after airline deregulation, which occurred in 1978, the airline industry continues to evolve, and really interested in hearing from our witnesses today and to continue efforts to evolve and provide America with more choices, more opportunities for safe air travel. So I look forward to being here. Thank all of you for being here today, taking the time to help educate us and help in this discussion. And with that, I yield back.
Now I'd like to turn to Mr. DeFazio for any remarks. Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, we're living in the safest period of the U.S. Civil aviation history. We can all be thankful for that, and we want to sustain that. We're also looking at one of the longest and most profitable sustained periods for the airlines. Combined after-tax profit, $25.6 billion in 15, including $6.8 billion in bag and reservation change fees. And I'd like to recognize that Brad Tilden here, representing Alaska, registered a record profit in 16 of nearly $1 billion. Congratulations. And a healthy industry is good for everyone, and travelers, employees, our economy as a whole, and we want to see this continue into the future. I am concerned, and Ranking Member Larson raised it earlier, about the IT situation. We had many thousands, tens of thousands of people stranded over the last couple of years because of IT meltdowns, some that relate to the dispatch of the planes, some that relate to the reservation systems. In one high-profile event, Chicago Midway Airport by a travel blogger was described as a war zone with the floors covered by stranded passengers. None of the airlines represented here today caused those disruptions, although SkyWest partnered some that did, and I'm going to be interested if Mr. Childs has any reflection upon how difficult it was for them and their intended passengers because of those problems. So the bill we introduced would give people, I mean, people in Chicago Midway were just told, go look at your, by that particular airline, go look at your contract of carriage if you want to know what you can get. We think it should be a little more clear than paging through the fine print somewhere online what obligations the airlines have when the airline itself has caused the problem with an IT meltdown. So we've introduced that bill today. The most important issue, as I said earlier, is safety. We have Colgan families here today, who many of whom I've met with and worked with in the past, and I appreciate your persistence. I think it was probably, I think I first raised the issue of 250 hours rating back in the early 90s. It took way too long to change that, and unfortunately you had tremendous losses that ultimately did lead to that change. You know, I observed many times that people who are becoming hairstylists and manicurists in Oregon had to have 600 hours of training, but you could, you know, have people's lives in your hands and fly a plane with 250 hours. That was not adequate. Some are out there saying that this has led to a pilot shortage. As Ranking Member Larson said earlier, we have a study showing that the pay is pathetically low at some regional airlines. And, you know, just look at Embry-Riddle. If you go to school there and go through the training for your certificate, it comes to about $300,000. Now, let's say, okay, some are advocating, well, let's roll back the hours and some other things, cut the costs. All right, let's cut it down to $200,000 to get a certificate, something I don't support, but if you think about what that means, $200,000 is a little over $2,000 a month on your loans. And you're earning $20,000 a year. Now, how does negative $4,000 income work out? That's why we had the co-pilot on the Colgan flight living in her parents' basement in Seattle and deadheading across the country. That shouldn't happen. You know, and a lot of young people are not going to make a rational decision to become pilots until the pay better matches the costs of getting the certificate and engaging in that occupation. So I think that is a problem, you know, but weakening the rules is not the solution. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. DeFazio. We'd now like to turn to our witnesses, and on the panel today included are Mr. Brad Tilden, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Alaska Air Group, Mr. Russell Chip Childs, President and Chief Executive Officer of SkyWest International, Mr. Joseph Hiti, did I get that right? President and Chief Executive Officer of Air Transport Service Group, Ms. Sara Nelson, International President of the Association of Flight Attendants-CWA, and Mr. Charles Leoka. Did I get that right? Okay. Chairman and co-founder of Travelers United. Mr. Tilden, you're recognized for your statement. Excuse me, could you pull it a little bit closer?
How's that? Is that any better?
Is your button pressed?
No. How's that?
That's a little better.
Okay. Chairman Lobiando, Ranking Member Larson, Chairman Schuster, and Ranking Member DeFazio, and members of the committee, thank you very much for this opportunity to testify today. It's a real pleasure to be here to talk about Alaska Airlines and the industry. My name is Brad Tilden, and I'm the CEO of Alaska Air Group. Alaska Airlines is the 5th largest airline in the United States following our recent acquisition of Virgin America. We now have approximately 19,000 employees, 280 aircraft, and we fly about 1,200 flights a day. While that may or may not sound like a large company, we are small by airline standards. We've been in business for 85 years, but we don't fit the legacy carrier mold in that we're low cost, low fare, and in that we've grown at a significantly higher rate than the average airline. Our customer-facing employees are focused on making the flying experience from start to finish as great as possible every day for our guests. As a testament to their skill and dedication, we're honored to have been recognized for 9 consecutive years by J.D. Power as the best traditional network airline. We are bullish on the airline industry, and we believe that with our cost structure, customer orientation, and operational capability, Alaska is well positioned to take advantage of an improving industry. Warren Buffett, who in the past famously derided investing in airlines, now invests nearly $10 billion in the industry. That says something. The industry has changed a lot in the last 10 to 15 years. The pervasive bankruptcies and consolidation we've dealt with have been painful and challenging, but the industry as a whole is now in a different and healthier place. Airlines are investing in their facilities, people, and products in order to win new customers. For example, Alaska recently launched premium class service, providing our guests more legroom and amenities as an option. We're enhancing in-flight entertainment and connectivity options. We're adding popular new local food and beverage options, and we're taking steps to make our industry-leading mileage plan even better. Beyond these areas, we're also making major capital investments in things like new seats, space-saving bins, and airport improvements. Despite improvements in the industry, it's more important than ever that aviation policies support vigorous competition. Today, the 4 largest airlines comprise more than 80% of the domestic market, whereas 10 to 15 years ago, it took 9 airlines to make up that much of the market. As you consider aviation policy issues, we ask you to embrace policies that keep the industry vibrant, including enhancing the ability for smaller carriers to gain access to constrained airports and enhancing our ability to share feed traffic with larger airlines. On that point, there are different perspectives on the Gulf carrier open skies issue. As a smaller airline without a global network, Alaska needs to partner with airlines from around the globe to have a chance of competing with U.S. airlines that have a global footprint and that can offer a one-stop shop to customers needing global access. We believe it's imperative that the U.S. government do zero harm to the vibrant U.S. open skies policy. The subject of this hearing is about building 21st century infrastructure in America. Alaska believes it's imperative to speed up modernization of air traffic control to deal with increasing congestion and delays and to bring it into the modern era. To be fair, modern GPS technology is used today by most airlines for the en route portion of flights. But once an airplane starts its descent, efficient operations are typically interrupted by the use of 1950s-era radar-based manual procedures. Herein lies a big opportunity. We need to modernize the system to connect the en route navigation structure with the arrival and approach phases of a flight. Alaska Airlines is deeply familiar with this technology. In the mid-1990s, we pioneered what is called required navigation performance, which are GPS-based approaches and which are a key building block of NextGen. However, today, more than 20 years later, we use these RNP approaches for just 4% of our approaches nationwide. We believe that in the future, airplanes should not be vectored left and right for spacing and engines shifted from idle to powered as airplanes descend and then level off in a stair-step approach to the runway. Instead, aircraft should arrive at a specific waypoint in the sky at a predetermined point in time to provide for spacing, and they should then begin a continuous glide at idle power following a precise curving flight path down to the runway. This will allow more airplanes into the system. It will materially reduce noise, fuel consumption, travel time, delays, and environmental emissions. As a pilot myself, I can tell you that this country's air traffic controllers manage the safest system in the world, and the FAA is full of talented professionals who have made progress with NextGen. However, under current governance and funding, we run a real risk that demand for airspace is going to rise at a rate that's more rapid than our rate of technology innovation, worsening delays. While we understand ATC reform may be a topic of future hearings, and while we know that there are numerous viewpoints on this subject, we would like to go on record with our belief that ATC reform, including the separation of ATC operations into an independent, nonprofit entity, as most other industrialized countries have done, is needed, and such a change will allow innovation and technology deployment to flourish. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you. Mr. Childs, you're recognized.
Good morning, Chairman Lobiando, Ranking Member Larson, Chairman Schuster, Ranking Member DeFazio, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. I'm Chip Childs, President and CEO of SkyWest Incorporated, which is the largest regional airline in the world. SkyWest Inc. owns and operates 2 regional airlines, SkyWest Airlines and ExpressJet Airlines. Combined, these entities complete more than 3,000 flights per day and carry 53 million passengers a year. This includes service to more than 250 cities in North America, Canada, Mexico, and the Caribbean. On behalf of SkyWest, ExpressJet, and more than 18,000 employees, I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and offer testimony about the importance of the regional airline industry. Regional airlines operate under Parts 121 and 135 and generally utilize aircraft with fewer than 100 seats in partnership with major airlines. As such, we are held to the same safety standards as mainline carriers. We treat federal safety regulations as the floor, not the ceiling, and take pride in meeting and exceeding these standards. We believe in one level of safety for all passenger carriers, and our safety culture drives everything at SkyWest and ExpressJet. To that end, we utilize advanced technology and innovative safety programs. Our flight crews and mechanics are some of the most experienced and thoroughly trained in the entire airline industry, with training programs that are allotted by the FAA. We are part of the regional airline industry, which is by no means small. In 2015, regional airlines operated 44% of the nation's departures and safely carried 157 million passengers on nearly 4 million departures, about 11,000 departures a day. We play a critical role in the aviation industry by connecting communities large and small to the global air transportation network. We fly as Delta Connection, American Eagle, United Express, and in partnership with Alaska Airlines. We share our majors' codes and have their names, color schemes, and logos painted on our aircraft. Regional airlines are job creators. Our industry employs more than 59,000 employees. Among these employees are approximately 15,000 flight attendants and 20,000 pilots, and our industry needs more. While SkyWest has been able to stay fully staffed with qualified pilots, our industry has been hit by a growing pilot shortage. We are honored that the major airlines recruit heavily from the regional industry, but this honor comes with consequences. According to university studies, major airlines will hire more than 18,000 pilots in the next 3 years. That is nearly the size of today's active regional airline pilot workforce. Within a decade, cumulative demand for pilots is forecast to reach 50,000 pilots. Overall, the shortfall of commercial airline pilots is forecast to reach 15,000 by 2026. Using an industry standard of roughly 10 pilots per aircraft, a shortfall of this magnitude would necessitate parking 1,500 aircraft. For perspective, this number corresponds to roughly 2/3 of the regional airline fleet in operation today. Thanks to the leadership of this committee, Congress gave FAA tools to address these concerns. Recognizing the high value of structured training, Congress authorized the FAA to approve alternate pathways for first officer qualification, allowing specific academic training courses to be credited toward a portion of total flight hours, where the administrator determines that these academic training courses will enhance safety more than requiring the pilot to fully comply with the flight hours. Pilots following these approved pathways hold restricted privileges ATP certificates and may serve as Part 121 airline first officers. These RATP pathways create a much higher level of safety and are well supported by data. Although Congress gave the FAA the authority to approve RATP pathways, the agency has taken a narrow view of its authority to grant additional pathways outside of military and degree program institutions. We urge Congress to prompt the FAA to use its existing authority to authorize additional RATP pathways. We could also help fill the shortfall with student loans. One of the single greatest deterrents facing new pilots is cost. Aspiring pilots can spend as much as $100,000 to $150,000 on a flight training path to commercial airlines. But the return on investment on these training dollars exceeds that spent on teachers, lawyers, and even doctors. While we seek ways to reduce costs and offer tuition reimbursements, scholarships, and other incentives, Congress can help by backing loans to these students to achieve their dreams and meet the pilot shortfall. Mr. Chairman and ranking members and distinguished members of the subcommittee, it's my pleasure to be here today, and I look forward to taking your questions at the conclusion of the panel.
Thank you, Mr. Hiti.
Chairman Lobiando, Ranking Member Larson, and members of the subcommittee. I'm privileged to serve as the President and CEO of Air Transport Services Group. Thank you for the opportunity to highlight our company's vision for all cargo aviation in the 21st century. ATSG wholly owns two airlines, ABX Air Inc. and Air Transport International, each independently certificated by the U.S. Department of Transportation. The company's airlines separately offer a combination of aircraft, cruise, maintenance, and insurance services, commonly referred to as ACMI services. ABX operates Boeing 767 freighter aircraft, while ATI operates 767s, 757 freighters, and 757 Combi aircraft. Combi aircraft are dedicated to the U.S. military and are capable of carrying passengers and cargo containers on the main deck. The airlines can conduct cargo operations worldwide. The air cargo industry is unique compared with other industry users. We have a different business model and operational characteristics, so it's important to recognize our segment of the aviation industry when making policy decisions. Today, I'd like to share with the committee some of the challenges and concerns we have and how they affect our cargo airline operations. We at ATSG have seen a great deal of change take place in the air cargo industry over the past 2 years. With stiff competition in the industry, removing specific regulatory burdens have the potential to pay off in the form of operational efficiencies, which will undoubtedly improve our cost and competitive abilities, as well as for our primary customers, the U.S. military, DHL, and Amazon. There are a few key topics of concern for our industry that I would like to share with you. Over the past few years, a debate has been waged over whether cargo pilots should continue to be regulated under the existing Part 121 rules or whether they should be subject to newer Part 117 rules. The Federal Aviation Administration after no less than 3 separate reviews, each time correctly found that the cargo pilot should be regulated under Part 121. These rules work for our industry. There has been no sound evidence to suggest a move to a one-size-fits-all rule would improve safety for all cargo pilots. And this makes sense as the air cargo industry is inherently different from the passenger carrier industry. As I mentioned earlier, ATI operates the 757 Combi, which carries passengers, and those flights are operated under the Part 117 rules. If ATSG's airlines were forced to comply with the 117 rules, we would have to hire more pilots, which would be a boon for the pilots' union, but would allow for even less flying time for each pilot, potentially affecting their proficiency. Changing the flight and duty time rules that apply to all cargo carriers is a bad idea, and doing so could actually make our operations less safe and put our pilots at risk. At ATSG's airlines, we provide more and longer flight crew rest opportunities in our cargo operations than our passenger counterparts. Most importantly, our pilots average 40 to 45 flight hours per month and are usually point-to-point, while passenger carrier pilots fly approximately 60 hours each month and include many segments per day. Our pilots are also only scheduled for duty 14 to 16 days out of every month, and in many cases that includes weekend layovers. Former Administrator Randy Babbitt said it best at an ALPA safety conference, in rulemaking, not only does one size not fit all, but it's unsafe to think that it can. With regards to the air transport of lithium batteries, ATSG supports the promulgation of tough and internationally consistent regulations governing the air cargo transportation of lithium batteries, as well as stringent enforcement of those regulations around the world. The key issue here for our company is consistency. We can simply not have a patchwork of international lithium battery transportation standards. Harmonization avoids confusion among shippers, carriers, and others in the supply chain while maximizing safety. Regarding the open skies issue, I share the opinion of the Cargo Airline Association that opposes altering the country's policy of expanding international opportunities through the negotiation of open skies agreements with trading partners. The all-cargo carriers have global networks with destinations all over the world, and we rely on the access open skies agreements that allow us to provide time-definite delivery of high-value goods. Unlike the passenger carriers, all cargo carriers do not have code share agreements or worldwide alliances and depend on the beyond rights inherent in open skies agreements to provide global service. Therefore, we oppose any attempt to jeopardize our existing open skies agreements. Finally, one of the biggest impediments to next-gen may not in fact be funding or transfer of ATC to a private entity, as many have talked about, but rather aircraft noise. With new, more fuel-efficient flight paths for aircraft being implemented as part of the airspace redesign for next-gen, new communities are exposed to noise that previously were not. Further, as a cargo operator, we fly a substantial number of nighttime operations, and any call to impose nighttime flight restrictions would be problematic. These issues tend to be local-level problems that then get elevated and then in time become congressional problems. While a lot of advancements have been made in the area of aircraft noise and a significant decrease in those exposed to noise has been achieved, this issue will continue to prove challenging for both the FAA and operators like us. In summary, I would oppose any effort to impose new aircraft noise restrictions that may undermine our national aviation and airport system or inhibit the implementation of next-gen modernization projects, which are crucial for the efficiencies of the future of air transport. Again, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today and discuss the issues important to ATSG, its airlines, and the future of the airline cargo industry. I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Ms. Nelson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Lobiondo, Congressman Larson, and members of the committee. We appreciate the opportunity to testify today about maintaining the safest, globally competitive U.S. aviation system in the world. As International President of the Association of Flight Attendants-CWA, representing nearly 50,000 flight attendants at 19 mainline, niche, regional, charter, and international airlines, I am proud to bring the expert voice from the aircraft cabin to this discussion. It is fitting that on International Women's Day, our union that was founded by strong women and which remains largely a workforce of women would have a platform to testify in the United States Congress. Our members are dutifully performing their work as aviation's first responders around the world today. But aviation would come to an immediate halt without the contributions of women in aviation, as there is a call for a day without women. We should recognize these women for the work that they do in aviation, and we appreciate the opportunity to testify on issues of equality in aviation today. My written testimony addresses 4 key issues flight attendants need: proper rest to do our work, an orderly and secure cabin free of voice calls, a reality check on the disparate compensation at regional airlines, and the enforcement of open skies agreements to keep global competition on a level playing field. AFA continues to advocate for equal rest for our flight deck counterparts, and thanks to over 100,000 flight attendants and our supporters speaking out and the action of this committee, a 10-hour minimum rest requirement and the implementation of a fatigue risk management plan for flight attendants was included in H.R. 4441 last year. We look forward to inclusion of this language in the base bill this year. Our job as aviation's first responders in the last line of defense in aviation has only become more challenging in recent years, with staffing at minimums and aircraft cabins fuller than ever. The FAA rest minimum for flight attendants is 8 hours, even after a 14-hour duty day. During our rest break, flight attendants exit the airport, eat dinner, check into and out of hotels, and report for duty after returning to the airport and transiting security. The reality is we only have an opportunity for 4 or 5 hours of rest. Studies commissioned by Congress show we need more rest. We are thankful to Chairman Lobiando, Congressman Capuano, Ranking Members DeFazio and Larson, and the members of this committee for including 10 hours rest and the fatigue risk management plan in the FAA reauthorization bill. Our industry is the safest in the world because of the work of the stakeholders represented today, the oversight of Congress, and our airlines' ability to compete on a level playing field with any other aircraft operator in the world. Our union is gravely concerned that this is all at risk due to the failure to enforce open skies agreements. The U.S. has negotiated 120 open skies agreements with the intention of providing increased travel and trade, enhancing productivity, and spurring high-quality job opportunities and economic growth. The majority of these agreements are working. However, failure of the previous administration to enforce open skies agreements with the Gulf states means Emirates, Etihad, and Qatar Airways are distorting the market with over $50 billion in subsidies from their governments. We can compete with any airline in the world, but competing with the treasuries of their governments is unsustainable and threatens to choke out U.S. carriers, ultimately destroying consumer choice as well. Every route seated is a cost of 1,500 U.S. jobs. If these airlines cannot play by the rules, then we must consider canceling these agreements that are being violated. In addition, the Obama administration made a grave mistake when it approved the foreign air carrier permit of Norwegian Air International. NAI violates Article 17 bis of the EU-US Open Skies Agreement by setting up an Irish subsidiary to capitalize on less restrictive labor laws. NAI's deliberate effort to undermine Norway's strong labor protections violates open skies and sets in motion a downward spiral for U.S. aviation and 300,000 U.S. jobs. This committee is uniquely positioned to take up this issue and stop the expansion of the approval of foreign air carrier permits for airlines operating according to this flag of convenience model. Aviation, born in the U.S., is perhaps one of the greatest symbols of our freedom. Our members and our passengers fly to every corner of the earth when only some can dream of crossing borders. Our airlines are staffed with those who come from service in our military, and we proudly transport our military around the world, most wonderfully to bring them home. The U.S. aviation industry accounts for 5% of U.S. gross domestic product, contributes $1.6 trillion in total economic activity, and supports nearly 11 million jobs. It is the symbol of American progress, innovation, and opportunity, and we must protect it. I understand with gut-wrenching firsthand experience that safety, security, and economic strength are paramount for an industry that continues to capture the imagination and attention of the world. As a Boston-based flight attendant on September 11th, 2001, I lost my dear friends, but I know, too, that in the midst of our grief and our resolve to keep our airlines flying, we lost over 100,000 aviation jobs, took massive pay cuts, lost our pensions, and now spend more time away from our families with staffing cut to minimum. Aviation workers had to face the harsh realities of a post-9/11 world, and so have our families. But in the long run, any aviation business model that seeks to operate solely on the backs of the people who make our airlines fly is not only inhumane, it is a threat to our safety. September 11th is not the exception to the rule for our charge as stakeholders, including, with deep respect, the Colgan Air families who are here today, and together with your careful oversight. It is forever the reality that a breach in aviation security and a wounded U.S. aviation industry is a threat to the very freedom of our nation and the prosperity of every community across the United States. Thank you, Chairman Lobiando, Congressman Larson, and Congressman DeFazio for serving as the strongest imaginable champions for our vital American industry. Flight attendants appreciate you and the members of this committee for the opportunity to testify here today, for your oversight, and for the protection of good American jobs. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leoka.
Thank you for giving passengers a seat at this hearing. My name is Charlie Leoka. I'm president of Travelers United, the country's largest travel advocacy group. We work intimately with both government and travel stakeholders here in Washington. Anyone who's flown recently in the back of a plane knows that passengers have far less personal space. Planes are flying fuller than ever. Legroom and seat width is being reduced, and ancillary fees are exploding. My testimony today focuses on a list of changes that have developed over the past decade in the aviation marketplace. Number one, common carriers. Airlines are common carriers. There are centuries of settled tort law. Pricing of common carrier services is considered public information. It used to be nailed up next to the door of their offices. It's been that way for thousands of years. The airlines, however, decided since 2008 to publicly release only partial pricing. Today, it is impossible to effectively comparison shop for airfares and fees. This has stopped IT development in its tracks. Once the full airfare and fee data is released, IT experts can expect new shopping engines that will allow passengers to comparison shop for airline travel. Don't tell the airlines, but they will make far more money selling their products throughout their total distribution network. Public pricing. Once an airline decides to work with travel agencies, their pricing should become public, and it always should be under the under common carriers. Airlines should not be permitted to pick and choose where their airfares and fees appear. Their prices are public information. Reservation system outages. These are under the complete control of the airlines. Airlines should not be allowed to treat them like acts of God. Bizarrely, passengers are being punished for the failures of the airlines. When there is an airline IT system failure, the airlines are responsible and should make their customers whole. Full refunds should be made available, and all airline tickets should be valid for at least a year from the date of the disruption. Plus, additional expenses should be covered. Next, DOT should reevaluate the antitrust immunity and airline alliance rules. Originally, these grants were developed to create a better travel experience for passengers. Today, the airlines are using these DOT-provided grants to stop competition. As smaller airlines like Alaska, JetBlue, Southwest, and Hawaiian begin to look at new markets, they are being faced with coordinated efforts by large alliances to deny them useful takeoff and landing slots at international airports. Airlines simply cannot compete without takeoff and landing slots. And without competition, consumers suffer, prices rise. Open skies treaties. These have been the bedrock of expansion for the U.S. aviation industry since the early 1990s. Today, these treaties are providing consumers some hope for competition and lower transatlantic and international airfares. Middle Eastern carriers, Etihad, Emirates, and Qatar, are serving a part of the world that was virtually ignored by the U.S. carriers for years. And low-cost carriers like WOW and Norwegian are finally forcing Delta, American, and United to lower transatlantic airfares. Better service to the fastest-growing areas of the world and lower transatlantic airfares are both enhanced by open skies treaties. Next, airport taxes. As head of Travelers United, I have never met a traveler who thought they should pay more taxes for using an airport. Any increase in airport funding should come from the surrounding municipalities that benefit from the economics of the airport. Passengers are already paying their fair share. Proposed airport fee increases may result in more than $60 of fees being added to a ticket before passengers even spend $1 on airfare. And that dollar is taxed another 7.5%. And finally, this one should be easy. Educate travelers about their rights. Congress doesn't have to pass any bills. DOT doesn't need any rulemakings. The only thing we need from our government is the courage to let passengers know the rights regarding compensation. And there's only two of them. One, passengers are due compensation for lost, damaged, and delayed luggage, up to $3,500. And when passengers are bumped, they can get compensation up to $1,350. That's it. End of domestic passenger compensations. I look forward to any questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. DeFazio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we have heard from two people mention of Etihad. Let's talk about that for a second. The Crown Prince is head of the Aviation Authority. The Crown Prince is head of the airline. The Crown Prince runs the airport, and the government is dumping massive amounts of money into a losing proposition. And it isn't just that they're providing service to parts of the world that were underserved. They're flying planes empty to places like Milan, Italy, and using their fifth freedom right to come across the Atlantic. Simple question. Do you think we should allow a state-owned enterprise in a monarchy, dictatorship? Do you think that's fair competition for our airlines? Just because you get a little bit off the ticket? Yeah. Yes or no, Mr. Leoka? You think it's fair?
Well, if what you
Yes or no?
If what you're saying is true,
Yes,
no.
it is true. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I don't know.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Tilden.
Okay.
Microphone. So do you want to be ultimately competing with, I mean, you want to partner with a state-owned enterprise, but what happens if a state-owned enterprise starts competing with you?
What I'd say about this, Alaska Airlines is a domestic airline operating in the U.S. We have treaties with these other
I
countries
know,
that
but
they should.
question, do you think the United States of America should have policies that require our capitalist, privately owned companies to compete with state-owned enterprises from dictatorships that are being financed in that manner?
I think every country in the world sets up their airline industry a little
Okay,
differently.
all right, so you're not going to thank...
Well, what I'll say is that all these airlines should be required to comply with the treaties. I do believe
Yeah,
that.
well, I don't think the treaty, most of our trade policy is a failure, and that's another example of it. Now, we just had a panel last week, Mr. Leoka, of airports talking about their needs. You're opposed to an increase in the passenger facility charge. Now, I'll give you an example. Denver was in to see me. They are doing everything they can, including a P3, to redo their main terminal, which needs to be redone to, tremendously facilitate the movement of passengers through security, and also will provide a much more shopping environment, all that kind of stuff. So they're using P3s. They've got a PFC. They're bonded out. You're saying they shouldn't be allowed to increase their PFC, but they have a dire need to extend their terminals to accommodate additional traffic so people won't be sitting on the ground waiting to get to a gate. So you're just saying you're against PFC increases no matter how well they're merited?
I'm saying that we don't need PFC increases. There are other ways to increase the money for the
Well,
airport.
excuse me, sir, but they are using a P3. They're getting a huge benefit from that. They are charging the airlines fees. They are doing everything else. And the question is, at some point, you're bonded out. And what are you going to do when you're bonded out? Now, I was the Democratic author of PFCs because I use the Eugene Airport. Eugene had to do municipal bonds to expand the airport. I didn't pay a cent. I don't live in Eugene. Now, you're just saying, well, the municipality benefits, and I live in the next town over, which you can hardly distinguish, but I shouldn't pay anything.
Those are questions which need to be raised by the localities, the municipalities.
Well, I raised them
serviced by
20
the
years
airport.
ago when we established a PFC, which I think is the fairest way to have a user fee-based system. And there are all sorts of restrictions on the PFCs. There are no abuses of PFCs. It is all benefiting the flying public. So I find your adamant opposition. I don't like the Greyhound bus experience, which I find in a number of airports that are constrained from making improvements, and the PFC is a fair way to make it. And in the case of Denver, a lot of those, the municipality isn't necessarily benefiting from all the people who are just changing planes in Denver, and that's what some of the terminals are targeted toward. What's the benefit there? So I just find your adamant opposition very problematic. And then finally, I did not want to get into ATC today, but if you could hold up the chart. Just again, Mr. Tilden, this is the organizational chart, because there's a little problem in privatizing in the United States of America. The Germans had to change their constitution. We're not changing ours.
Right.
So we prohibit private entities from doing anything that affects competition. So that means if they want to increase taxes, obviously, it has to go to the Secretary. If they want to change flight paths, it has to go to the Secretary. If they want to change next-gen procedures, it goes to the Secretary. If they want to change anything else regarding ATC, it has to go to the Secretary. If they decide to close an air traffic control tower, contract tower, et cetera, it has to go to the Secretary. If the Secretary disagrees, then we go to court. I don't find that to be a more efficient system, plus you're cleaving the FAA in half, and certification, which is vital to manufacturers, stays over here, and yes, we move ATO over here. I believe there are other ways to resolve long-standing issues, and I didn't really want to get into this today, but since you raised it, I had to say that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. DeFazio. Is Mr. Davis back yet? No, Mr. Gibbs.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Hiti, welcome, fellow Buckeye. I hear you're from Ohio, down at Wellington Base in Clinton County. Just wanted to recognize you, fellow Buckeye. I guess first question to anybody on the panel wants to talk about. You know, we've seen we had a downturn in the industry, and the industry's bounced back and doing well now, and we're seeing things turn around a lot. And we've also seen quite a few mergers, you know, in recent years. And I guess my first question is, how does the capacity issue interact with the regional carriers and the big carriers, and for slots and you know, just the airports in general? Just how's that interaction work? So anybody wants to try to answer that, appreciate it.
I'll take a shot at it if I could. You know, our business model that we have at regional carriers, to be clear, what we do is in my opening statements, we fly for the major carriers, and we are under contract with them to where we get paid either a block hour or a flight hour basis to fly the routes that they want us to fly. We do not have any material say in the slots or how we're scheduled in the big cities. That's completely up to the major carriers that make all those decisions for us. We just go where they want us to go and make sure we coordinate it and doing it in a very safe and effective manner. But we don't have any say relative to how we're utilized in those big areas.
Mr. Tilden, I think you're biting the bit there.
There, that's on. Yeah, I think this is an interesting time in our country. These airports were built 40, 50 years ago. In some cases, a runway was added 10 or 15 years ago. But facilities are constrained. I think almost every airport Alaska is in is significant. Every big airport, LAX, San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, is significantly constrained. And I just think that's a fact of our future. To points that others have made, I do think this is a time for substantial investment in infrastructure. I think folks are doing this. We're on board with that. I think the industry is a lot healthier today than it was 10 or 15 years ago, so airlines are better able to support these very substantial capital programs, and I think airspace is a part of that. You know, so we need more capacity in the airspace. We need more capacity at the airport itself.
Capacity. So we got the issue with runways, just getting passengers through the terminals, and then the issue with airspace. So they're obviously intertwined. But so if we ever get the next gen adopted and moving on, is that solve that airspace issue? And
that will go a long way to helping. There's constraints. There's airspace, runways, terminal gates, even roadways in front of the airport. There's constraints sort of at every step of the process, but airspace is certainly a big one.
Okay. I guess, go ahead.
Oh, Congressman Gibbs, I think it's also important to recognize the interplay between the regionals and the main lines for the people who make the airplanes fly. As Mr. Childs testified, the regional airlines provide 45% of the lift in the domestic market, but the pilots and flight attendants are also being paid at 45% the rate, even though the same passengers are buying the same tickets and expecting to get to the same destinations. So it's an important piece within a part of all this discussion.
Since you brought that up, Ms. Nelson, I saw, it must have been a year ago, an article in the newspaper, and I was really taken back by what they were saying that the salaries were for regional personnel. And as I recall, I think, I don't know if it was a pilot or the co-pilots could be around low 20,000 annual pay. Is that?
That's correct.
which is...
It's insufficient, and it's part of the reason that you have twice as many pilots with certificates to fly today as are performing the jobs today. If we can increase those wages and provide a living wage for these people, we will encourage people to enter the market.
So you just said there's twice as many pilots that are available, they're just not, because they've got to find other jobs to support their families, is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay. Anybody want to respond to that?
Yeah, I'd love to respond to that. I think that there's been a tremendous move and shift in compensation in the last couple of years with pilots and some flight attendants as well. And it's important to note, you know, as we went through the statistics early on in my testimony, we are like, and in my written testimony, we are the only source of travel for over 60% of the airports that we serve. We've never really come out of service at SkyWest or ExpressJet due to a lack of a pilot scenario. We've come out because it didn't make economic sense. Now, other carriers outside of us do have a very, very difficult time, and all of us see a very significant pilot shortage on us today. And a lot of people believe that there's a very strong inventory out there. I can tell you from personal experience, because we hire them and we interview them and we train them, that that is absolutely not the case. We're deeply concerned about the statistics as it's moving forward in the next 3 years. There's a lot of retirements of the mainline carriers, and there simply is not enough backfilling them as of today. So we need to do some things to make sure that we fix that.
Thank you, Chair. My time's expired.
Mr. Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Tilden, in your written testimony, you discussed RNAV, instrument procedures and such, and said nationwide it's a 4%, about a 4%. For your flights, about 4%. In CTAC, do you have a percentage?
I do not have that percentage with me. It's not, despite greener skies, it isn't 25% even.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's less than that.
And what steps then, either nationally or even at CTAC, could be done to increase that to something higher than it is?
Yeah, the situation we have is that these greener skies or RMP approaches have to be approved for every approach to every runway end at every airport. So CTAC, there's 3 runways, so that means there's 6 runway ends, and there's 2 or 3 approaches to each runway. And there's noise is one of the other gentlemen spoke to noise. Noise is a big part of the review process. The FAA takes time to develop the procedures. So what we have is a one-by-one approval of each of these approaches. And I just think somehow we need a much more rapid, in my own way of thinking about this, there should sort of be a default view that these approaches, this technology is better than what we have today. Even though the noise may be a little bit, it'll be an engine at idle power, and with GPS, it'll be the same track every day. It may hit one house more than the current system, but there will be way less noise with this new technology than we have with the old. So some sort of fast tracking of these approaches, I think, would help us.
Yeah, so it's not just a matter of different approaches, it's also in how you operate that approach as well, what you're saying.
Yes.
If you have the same kind of approaches, but we still do the stair step in and out, we're not really taking full advantage of the technology.
Correct. But I think in the perfect world, these approaches are designed so that the airplane at altitude, 38,000 feet, it goes to idle power and it stays there until, you know, maybe a little bit of a true up just at the end before it touches down.
Just don't tell your passengers that.
Safety is number one above everything else.
Yeah, I know. Just flew in yesterday. Ms. Nelson, could you go into a little more detail on flight attendant fatigue and why that's an important issue to you all?
Yes, I appreciate that very much. Flight attendant fatigue is something that we have been working on addressing for the last 30 years. The first duty and rest regulations went into place in 1994, and they were essentially a dart thrown at a dartboard just to get something on paper. Then Chairman Norm Mineta suggested that there should be a 10-hour free-from-duty rest. And the reason for that is what we have seen through the fatigue studies, 7 fatigue studies commissioned by Congress, that show that there needs to be more rest in order to avoid fatigue, if you can imagine. That was the conclusion. And so in order to get that proper rest, because of the duties that have to be completed during that rest time as well, it's important to have the 10 hours rest that's equal with our flight deck counterparts that is now in place. And we are adamant to get this done, especially with the increased duties and less staffing that flight attendants have on board, with more opportunity for error, with fewer of us handling more passengers. It's simply unacceptable. We've got to address this fatigue issue and have equal rest with our flight deck counterparts.
Yeah, thanks. Mr. Hiti, I believe the current administration pulled back a rule from PHMSA on transporting lithium batteries, but I understand you support the ICAO's work to improve the standards for transporting lithium batteries, and you consistently, do you have a consistent pattern about how you transport lithium?
Yeah, I think it's critical because if you look at our customers, DHL, for example, everything that we handle for them throughout their North American network is an international shipment, either originating or destinating in an international environment. And so if you have a mixed bag of rules and you don't have harmonization of those rules, you have an exposure to a shipment getting into the system without following prescribed procedures, and no one wants to see that happen. Okay. So it's got to be consistent across the board.
Yeah, thanks. Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back and let someone else have a chance. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lamalfa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Childs, thank you for appearing and for the whole panel here today. From far northern California, where including airports such as Chico and Redding, until 2014, Chico had service from SkyWest, and I know that regional airlines do face unique challenges, et cetera, and some of the testimony I heard from the panel here that they can operate between the smaller airports, but this is also at the behest of what the parent airline that you're contracting with requires. So is it different to operate just between the smaller airports, or when you have to tie into a larger one where the major aircraft and the parent airline is operating? Is there a difference in the way you can operate that way? Do you have more freedom to set rates or types of service, numbers of trips, et cetera, like, say, Chico to Redding or Redding to Oregon, places like that?
Yeah, so let me go back, because we miss serving Chico, honestly. And from our perspective on how that happens, there are some models that we do under a prorate arrangement where we do have some freedoms to do some things. That only constitutes about 10% of our particular model, and many regional carriers don't even have that model. So back historically, when it was with Chico, we enjoyed to do great service there. We did it with a turboprop, a 30-seat Brasilia. And as we continued to evolve as a company, we started to take larger aircraft. And as we continued to, execute on some good, strong compensation models with our people, unfortunately, what happened was that it did not make economic sense, and we couldn't do it profitably there. So that technically was one of our decisions that we also made with our partner. We were doing it with United at the time, and that was one at which the cost was prohibitive, and because of certain elements of our business model where that service was.
Understood. We had some airport representatives, as was mentioned earlier last week, and some of that tied into the conversation. So if a 30-seat turboprop plane, as you mentioned, and they talked about last week, also was those are being phased out. What is the size of the aircraft, the more regional jets, and is that part of the volume, part of the reason it's priced out on more regional airports like that?
Yeah, that's
like
exactly
60, 70 passengers. Is that?
Yeah. So the majority of our fleet is a 50-seat jet, and we now are taking more new aircraft that are at 76 seats with first-class configuration and longer range and that type of stuff. So that's the trend. That's what the manufacturers are making. You bring up an excellent point, because there are cities that, from our economic model, we can't serve anymore. We've gotten bigger, and certainly given our compensation strategy with that, we can't serve with a 30-seat aircraft anymore. There's a lot of other carriers that can. and they're the ones that are struggling with attracting pilots, and they're the ones that are struggling with some of the things that they can do to actually execute on those plans. So unfortunately, Congressman, your city is an interesting case study about what our situation is, because our economic model is very volatile, and it's one which is it can't bear a lot of fluctuation relative to costs, and that's kind of what we have to work with within our industry.
Are the facilities themselves part of the issue, being able to handle, versus the turboprop aircraft, the jetway, or what are some of the issues with that the facilities might need more upgrades on to accommodate a newer?
There are a lot. If this industry continues to evolve the way it is, away from turboprops to jets, the same way that we did, there are a lot of small airports that need to make airport adjustments, longer runway, wider runway, emergency equipment, those types of things to accommodate the jet. We are working in no less than 10 cities since we've pulled out with turboprops and want to go back in with 50-seat aircraft. If it's economically viable, that the communities need to upgrade their airports and their facilities to accommodate a 50-seat jet, which would be the next step for most of these communities.
Well, Chico, for example, has a 6,700-foot runway, and I've seen 737s take off there, so that's probably not the issue there, right?
Not in Chico, no.
Okay, is there anything that Department of Transportation regulation-wise that are causing any kind of imposition to be able to do what you need to do on either on the regional basis or in its integration with the larger carriers or larger airports?
So I don't know if there's anything the Department of Transportation specifically can do, but we, in my opening statements, we talked a lot about some solutions to keep the regional airline viable and strong. We fundamentally believe that if we keep a strong stream of pilots coming into the industry, good things happen all around. Everything becomes more safe. We can make more clear decisions relative to some of the things that the manufacturers want to make. I mean, part of our problem, particularly with Chico, is if it's not supportive of a 50-seat aircraft, we need a manufacturer that makes an aircraft that can fit the size of your town. And the manufacturers simply don't want to make that aircraft because they don't have confidence that we have a strong pilot stream within the industry. So the industry needs confidence about the fact that we will have pilots. As an entity, are comfortable that we're going to do what it takes to do it safely. But again, the other thing that we can do is do some of these restricted ATP things, which actually enhance safety. We're not out here to reduce the 1,500-hour rule. I actually like the rule, and that's not. I think that that's a good mark. But I think that we know now that there are some things from a safety perspective that we can have some alternate pathways to help people get integrated into the industry.
Sorry, I have to yield back. Thank you. Appreciate the answers.
Mr. Lipinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know Mr. DeFazio, Ranking Member DeFazio, had talked about the Middle Eastern Airlines and the unfair competition. We want to make sure that we have rules that are in place that help the airlines, the airline employees, and the flying public. I wanted to raise another related issue in regard to international competition in the Norwegian Air International. As most of you probably know, NIA is flying as an Irish airline with flight crews employed by contracts that are governed by the laws of several Asian countries. Sort of leaves you wondering who the regulator is here. Clearly, well, unfortunately, this was approved here in the U.S. I would assume that going forward, there may be more attempts to do something similar. I think it really undermines our open skies agreement in regard to maintaining labor standards. And so I wanted to ask Ms. Nelson what the effect of something such as NIA has on your members' employees.
Thank you, Congressman Lipinski. Yes, this is a grave concern for us. What Norwegian has done here is they have created a subsidiary with the Norwegian name to essentially hoodwink the public and regulators to believe that they are going to be flying under the same standards, high standards that we would expect from Norway. As a signatory to the U.S.-EU Open Skies Agreement that was negotiated based on the idea that we would maintain the high labor standards in the U.S. and EU, none of the other provisions would have gone forward unless that first standard was met. And yet, the NAI permit was granted, setting aside, essentially, Article 17 bis. Not saying that it wasn't being violated. It's being violated with this flag of convenience in Ireland, which will allow a DECO or OSM, essentially these temp agencies that hire out aviation workers, pilots and flight attendants and other workers, from anywhere in the country or anywhere in the world where they can find the lowest labor standards. We cannot compete with that. Not only that, but there are U.S.-based Norwegian flight attendants working for Norwegian today. What Norwegian has attempted to do is to also hoodwink the public into believing that the NAI certificate needed to be approved in order to offer U.S. jobs, when in fact we have no assurances from Norwegian that they will continue to hire under U.S. or European contracts once this takes hold. Our European counterparts told us that their airlines were very honest with them, that they were opposed to this flag of convenience model that NAI sets up. But if it was approved, they will have to immediately compete within 2 years' time. SAS has already filed for an Irish certificate just since this permit has been approved. So we are seeing this. This is going to be a faster destruction than there was with the flag of convenience model with U.S. shipping, where now we see Liberians flags flying in our ports. All of our airlines will be choked out because they will not be able to compete. The flight attendants flying for Norwegian here today have just unionized. They are voting right now to join the Association of Flight Attendants because we are going to beat back these temp agencies who form short-term contracts with them when they get too old, too fat, they're the wrong color, they don't go along, they can just end their contracts when it comes to the next time. They only have a 4-year pay scale because they do not intend for these people to stick around. These are some things that we beat back in 1946. And this is where our aviation industry is headed if we allow the flag of convenience to remain in place, if we allow Norwegian to continue to hoodwink the public and allow other carriers to follow their suit, to follow this flag of convenience model for putting down their flag wherever they need to in the world so they can find the lowest labor standards and compete based on that. Our airlines can't compete. U.S. aviation workers can't compete, and the reality is that 300,000 good U.S. aviation jobs are at stake here.
Thank you. Can I have another minute, Mr. Chairman? You can say no. All right, I will yield back.
Well, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
All right, very quickly, Mr. Tilden, Mr. Larson went through some of what you're doing to increase efficiency. I know you've done some work with, you did a flight with biomass fuel. You work with Boeing. Boeing uses the CLEAN program to research for engine efficiency. Is this something that's also very helpful to what you are trying to do with efficiency?
It is. We're really proud. I think it's still the case that Alaska Airlines has the most fuel-efficient fleet in the industry. That's also true of Horizon Air for regional airlines. And we have been a big partner with anybody that approaches us with biofuels or other alternative fuels. Well, we're really, there's a big role for the science community and the engine manufacturers and others in that. What we're really trying to do is demonstrate that there's a market. If somebody can bring a new fuel to the market, we've run several of these flights, commercial flights with biofuels on board, just to demonstrate if this fuel does come to market in a feasible fashion, we'll buy it.
All right, thank you. I yield back.
Thanks.
Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for granting Mr. Lipinski the extra minute. That was a great question. I'm supportive of that. So, and I want to thank you for asking the question of Ms. Nelson, because you took mine. So I want to add my name to being supportive of that question too. But thank you for your response, and thank you for what you're doing. We want to make sure that we offer bipartisan consensus on some of the concerns that were addressed. Mr. Childs, during your opening remarks, I fly a lot of regional airlines in central Illinois. Thank you for what you do in keeping many of my regional airports active. But you also mentioned something about student loans and student debt. I've got a bill I would love for you to take a look at. It's called the Employer Participation in Student Loan Assistance Act. I figured our team probably could have thought of a shorter title, but they didn't, so I'll address that later. But what it does is it creates a private sector incentive for companies like yours and others to have another tool in the toolbox to address student debt. And that's a tax incentive to provide up to $5,250 a year to your employees to pay down their debt. The employees wouldn't be taxed on it. Win-win, addresses a big problem. Please take a look at that. We love your support. Now, Mr. Tilden and Mr. Childs, my colleague, Mr. DeFazio, talked a lot about ATC reform. He and I are good friends. He may not admit that, but I do. But I'm on the other side of that debate. Yeah. I support ATC reform. I think NextGen's rollout has been a continuous, inefficient, expensive rollout that we're not seeing progress in. Now, there were a lot of charts put up. I don't have any, but I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts of those charts? What are your thoughts on ATC reform? How can we make the aviation industry better through ATC reform? We'll start with Mr. Tilden.
Thank you, Congressman Davis. And if I could, I just wanted to support Chip Childs on the pilot training. I think this is a real issue for our country. Alaska feels this issue as well. I do think when I went to Pacific Lutheran University with Congressman Larson, I got student loans that were guaranteed by the federal government. I think if we could bring something like that to the pilot profession, the mechanic profession, I think it would be really beneficial, and Alaska would certainly be supportive.
Thank you.
On ATC reform, I know it's a contentious issue. I know that people feel differently. How we feel about this is that that we've actually had this. It actually isn't a technology problem anymore. It's a technology deployment issue. The technology has been proven. It's been in place for 21 years, and the speed is just not what it could be. And I personally think it's a time, and I do respect the diversity of opinion on this, but I personally think it's flying is about freedom. This is the greatest country in the world. We invented flying here. Almost everything about flying was done in this country. I think it's a time for us to move forward and create airspace that is the most modern and in a time of more and more congestion is the most advanced in the world. And I think I think safety will actually be enhanced if we say the FAA, you're responsible for making sure we're safe at every single juncture, and separate the operation of the system into another company or another organization that has whatever oversight it needs to have, but has stability with funding, it has stability with governance, and it has a singular focus to give us the best airspace system in the world.
And what you're saying is the status quo is not achieving any of those goals.
The status quo, I personally believe that demand is growing at a rate that's higher than technology deployment. So delays are getting worse and worse by the year.
And costing taxpayers.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Childs?
Well, he's my partner, so I shouldn't probably say much more than what he did. He did a great job. The only thing I want to emphasize is that, operating a regional aircraft, we want to be very careful about how it's funded. No matter what the reform is, you can get into a dots on the screen scenario, but we fundamentally, like we've talked about, the volatility of our model is tight. And we just want to make sure that it's a fair representation of the economics within our model. But we're 100% in support of the, the direction that you're going down with that. And I agree with Mr. Tilden on those points as well.
All right. Any additional points, Mr. Tilden, you want to make on ATC reform? And comparatively speaking to any other countries?
I think I made the point in my testimony. There are different models in different countries, but most industrialized countries in the world have moved to a separate air traffic management organization, separate from the FAA or the safety oversight, aviation safety oversight. And I think the examples are mixed. There are some great examples. There are examples that aren't so good, but there are models out there for us to look at if we choose to.
All right. Thank you. I yield back.
I'd like to now recognize Mr. Mr. Capuano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Nelson, I just want to kind of draw a big, bold line into this. The other day when I took a late flight home, 9 o'clock, I landed. Actually, I landed before 9. The 8-hour rest period. Last passenger gets off, flight attendant steps off the plane, the 8 hour starts, bang. Flight attendant has to walk out to the sidewalk, just like me, get a ride, usually from a van, to a hotel. I'm going home, they're going to a hotel. Check into the hotel, grab something to eat, and go to sleep. So let's just assume, for the sake of discussion, that the 8 hours starts at 9 p.m. Let's assume they're asleep by 11 p.m., which, of course, nobody I know that works a 9 to 5 job is asleep at 7 p.m., but let's just assume it for the sake of discussion. In order to get back to work by 5 a.m., which is the 8-hour period, you have to do the same thing in reverse. Have to wake up, grab a shower, check out of the hotel, have a little something to eat, grab a ride back to the airport, get off that shuttle, walk through security, and walk down, and the 8 hours starts the minute you step on that plane. That means that's left you with, now again, that presumes you've had 2 hours from the end of your shift to the time you're actually asleep. If you have to take you 2 hours to do that, it takes you 2 hours in the morning, that leaves you 4 hours to sleep. Now, as I understand it, pilots have 6. You have 4. How many flight attendants were lost on 9/11?
25.
How many flight attendants were on the flight with Sully Sullenberger when he landed in the Hudson?
3.
Did they do their job?
They did their job perfectly.
And their job was a little bit more than serving drinks and picking up after my trash. It was saving my life.
That's correct.
I only do this, I know you know all these answers, and I know the people at the panel, and I know the people here know it, but I do it to make sure that people understand, to the best of my ability, the flight attendants are a lot more important than what we see on a regular basis. I don't want to see a flight attendant in an emergency situation. And when they ask me, when I'm sitting in the emergency room, if I'm willing to help, they say, you really don't want me opening that door, that's a problem. And I want a flight attendant there who's trained on how to help me. So I actually don't think you're asking for much. I think you're asking for ridiculously little, and I hope that Congress can do what is long overdue to get this done. Mr. Tilden, I'd like to shift gears a little bit. I'm a big supporter of NextGen. I totally agree with everything you said about trying to catch up in technology and trying to make things efficient. But does NextGen alone require a specific flight path to make it work?
No, I think NextGen's about
it allows
using
more options.
A lot of different technologies to shorten the travel
As an
time.
executive of a growing airline, do you ever concern yourself with the noise of the people who live under these flight paths?
Yes.
I figured you would. You should. And I believe that.
Yeah.
So therefore, there's nothing that you know about in NextGen that would prohibit the FAA and my NATCA people from changing the flight paths to spread whatever noise is there. Noise is noise. I get it. But there's no need to have a flight path continuously going over one house and only one house. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think it's a fair statement.
The reason I ask, because many of us have had some trouble. The FAA has finally acquiesced to try to take a look at it. I think we can have modern next-gen equipment,
Yeah.
saving you some money, saving me some time, and still concern ourselves with the quality of life of people who live under flight paths.
I agree with you, sir.
Thank you. That's really all I want to say. Mr. Childs, would you agree with that?
I'd agree with that, yes.
And Mr. Hetty, would you agree with that?
I'd agree with that.
I'm not going to ask you two guys because you don't know the airlines. If you did, though, I know you would. I guess I'm just going to use the last 30 seconds I have to also add my voice to the Norwegian thing. The Norwegian thing is horrendous. And it is an absolutely wrong decision, and it is heading in a direction exactly as you described, Ms. Nelson. It's jeopardizing American jobs. Mr. Tilden, you will not be able to compete if this goes undone. But I also want to add one more thing. Mr. Tilden, what's your largest airport that you service?
Los Angeles.
Los Angeles. If I started an airline tomorrow and I wanted to fly to LA, and California said, you know something, Mike? We're going to give you, your new airline, $4 billion to be able to fly into LA so you don't have to pay quite so much landing fee. You think that would be fair?
No, and to be fair, I wasn't asked, but Alaska actually has not taken a position on the Norwegian Air International.
I'm not asking you to take a position.
yeah.
I'm just kind of using it to, like,
No, I said it earlier, but just to be really clear, as a little airline ourselves, we're 6%, 5.5% or 6% of the industry now with Virgin America. At every opportunity, we want to make the case that we want a level playing field. And the simple point I made with the Gulf Coast Airlines is that we're competing against airlines that can go into companies and say, we're a one-stop shop. We can sell you tickets all over the world. Alaska can't. And in a network business, we need to build partnerships with others to have
and that's
any
why
shot
I'm not
at
asking you to knock your partners.
Got it.
That would be wrong.
Gotcha.
But fair is fair.
Right.
And fair is a level playing field.
Yep.
The government not paying me
Yeah.
to do what somebody else already does.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you, Mr. Tilden. Mr. Chairman, looks like I'm over. You're getting kind of loud.
You're always over.
I yield back
Just
the
for
remainder of the time I don't have.
Just for the record, you're always over. Mr. Webster.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Tilden, you mentioned constrained capacity in your testimony, and I had a question about, are you satisfied with the way you can obtain a gate slot at an airport in general? Do you think it's balanced?
At most airports in our country, it's actually a good system. The government gives these airports money, and as a consequence of receiving federal money, they're required to create access for airlines like Alaska that might want to come into Chicago or Indianapolis or what have you. There are a handful of highly constrained airports, and I think smaller airlines like Alaska would say, no, we would like more access to these airports, and if we had more access, we'll bring our brand of service, different fares, and so forth. So I think in the most congested, slot-controlled airports, more access would be a good thing for competition and for smaller airlines.
So how could you, how would you propose to remedy that?
You know, I didn't sort of put a lot of thought into this today, but in markets like JFK, as an example, I think we got into there a couple of years ago with one red-eye flight. I think as we look to make changes in the flight schedule at JFK, we might allocate a certain number of slots, a certain number of landing rights and departure rights for airlines that don't have capacity, airlines that will come in and bring competition to the marketplace.
I have another question about cybersecurity. There was another panel a while back, I don't remember exactly when, and they downplayed cybersecurity in the flight industry. And then on the other hand, I was in another committee, and they were talking about the fact that even Barbie dolls have IPOs. And I'm not sure why, maybe just because they can do it. I don't know, but it seems like if that is open, maybe there's a problem. Do you see, or can you even talk about in a public forum what might be the problems in cybersecurity?
I could speak to that. Are you talking about cybersecurity with respect to airlines generally, or
yes.
with respect to
well, more specific you can get, great.
Yeah. No, I think it's a big concern for every U.S. company. I think it's a particular concern for airlines. You've seen airlines have had some outages, some issues in the last 2, 3, 4 years. Alaska had an outage 5 years ago that required us to shut down our operation for half a day. I think folks are dealing with it, and it is one of these, whatever, the bad guys are moving at a certain rate, and we're trying to move as fast as we can. At Alaska, I'll tell you that we have quadrupled our IT budget in the last 5 years. We've gone from roughly $50 million a year to roughly $200 million of spending on IT. And a lot of cybersecurity, I would call that defensive. A lot of that spending is defensive. It doesn't really add, it protects our operation the way it is today, but it doesn't really add new features or functionality or benefits for our customers.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Go back.
Mr. Carson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hiti, in your written testimony, you note that ATSG provides more and longer flight crew rest opportunities than your passenger counterparts. Would you care to comment further? And as you noted, your opposition to any new aircraft noise restrictions. As you know, noise is a very contentious issue for members of Congress, what steps would your airline subsidiaries be willing to reduce with regards to local communities' exposure to aircraft noise?
Well, I think with the existing ATC system, we have to follow prescribed flight paths to begin with, so there's not much you can do in regard to controlling noise other than operate the aircraft according to the manufacturer's specifications and keep your engines as low a turn rate as possible. So we don't have a lot of flexibility in that regard today. Our concern is more as if you expand and go to a next generation system, that if it imposes more restrictions on us, since most of our flying is done in the off hours during the nighttime, since we service the express industry primarily, that we have a larger exposure, I think, in that regard to the time that people are sleeping. So it's a greater concern to us than it would be for the passenger carriers operating daylight hours. As far as the crew rest times, as I said, our operations are built around primarily a 5 or call it 5.5 day a week operation. Most flights are one flight into a hub and maybe a shorter leg tagged onto it thereafter, and then the pilot's off duty for a considerable period of time. If they fly to a West Coast, we have 36-hour layovers, for example, where they get the additional rest period. So it's not a great as concern for us because of the limited number of flight legs that we do fly in a given day.
Thank you. Ms. Nelson, we've heard from U.S. regional airlines that they are experiencing a growing pilot shortage. And this kind of shortage is often attributed to the 2010 requirement that airline first officers possess an airline transport certificate. Now, as you know, this requirement raised the training prerequisite for first officers to 1,500 flight hours. As president of AFA, you have a vested interest in aviation safety. Do you take your position on this issue? Do you take a position on this issue and whether there should be any rollback on minimum flight hours for first officers?
The Association of Flight Attendants supports the position of the Airline Pilots Association and the Colgan families who are here today. We believe that industrial issues should not inform safety issues in aviation.
Okay. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Westerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Nelson, could you elaborate a little bit more about your concerns with voice calls on airplanes?
Yes, we have incredible concerns with voice calls on airplanes. We have concerns in many ways. First and foremost, our members are charged with keeping order in the cabin, and more we are having to de-escalate conflict. We are concerned about the conflict that this will increase as people are having to listen to very loud business meetings or conversations with new boyfriends or girlfriends or relationships that are ending. Whatever those conversations may be, people don't want to hear it in the space of the cabin where they are closer together than they've ever been before. But even more so, we have a concern with security. And if terrorists are able to communicate in real time through voice communications, Richard Reed's bomb likely would have gone off. Flight attendants would not have been able to thwart that effort. If we have voice calls allowed in the cabin, we will not be able to see those who are intending to use this for ill purposes. They will not stand out. They will blend in. And so for those reasons, we're adamantly opposed, and we're also opposed, we believe, because we also are often the strongest advocates for the passengers in our care, and they are unanimously opposed to voice calls in the cabin.
Yeah, I believe you just addressed a question about pilots, but what can be done from a policy standpoint to encourage more young people to pursue aviation careers?
I think, from an aviation career standpoint, a lot of it's just awareness for young people to be aware of what the opportunities are in the aviation community. I know there's a lot of focus on pilots, but we also operate an MRO, maintenance, repair, and overhaul operation, and from a technician standpoint, trained aircraft mechanics, it's a very short supply as well, just because of lack of familiarity of the opportunities there for young people to get into those career fields. Certainly from a pilot standpoint, the investment is significantly greater than you would have for a mechanic, for example. So anything that could be done to facilitate the funding of those certainly would be a long-term benefit.
And Ms. Nelson, I saw a story recently about, I think this actually happened several years ago, but it was highlighting airline employees intervening in human trafficking. There was a young girl who, I believe, passed a note in the bathroom and found out she was being harassed or trafficked. What can you explain more about the progress of enhanced training required by our 2016 bill to help flight attendants detect human trafficking?
Yeah, I'd like to thank this committee very much for taking up that issue and mandating training for flight attendants to recognize and report human trafficking. The only issue is that there was not a process to implement that training or specific requirements about what would be contained in that training. And so we are working with our airlines to implement those programs to the highest standards possible, hopefully aligning with the Blue Lightning initiative of DHS and DOT. We are a little bit concerned that this is not moving as quickly as it should. We've heard from flight attendants over the years that they have seen something that just doesn't look right or thought about it after the flight but didn't know what to do at the time. So everyone needs to understand how to recognize it, what to do, how to report it, and how to get it to the proper authorities so that we can stop human trafficking in our skies.
Yeah, I've got one final question, I guess, more for the airline companies, but I live in a rural district where what commercial airline service we got is essential air service, and I get complaints from my constituents on the quality of that service. So what can we do to get more twin-engine turboprops would be an improvement in some of these airports, or even jet service through the essential air service program?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do, quite candidly, with the economics and that type of stuff. I mentioned earlier that the best thing for us is to make sure we've got a very strong, ample supply of aviation professionals. I think reassuring the confidence with manufacturers, airplane manufacturers and that, so that they continue to move technology in the right direction is a great thing. And more importantly, speak out to your carrier. I don't know which exactly location you're meeting with, but there's a lot of great opportunities that are being left behind today throughout the United States relative to essential air service, great communities that deserve outstanding support. But some of the things that we've talked about in my previous written and oral testimony, I think, are very key elements to help us resolve that. Enhancing safety to making sure that we've got an RATP, make sure there's an awareness, like was discussed, about how good the aviation community is. We need more diversity within it. And then we need some loan programs for pilots that helps them get to a very lucrative career, what's out there today. All of that stuff will come back to small communities, but we've got to get a granular, more confidence in the regional airline side to make sure that we get the right aviation professionals in there to help even have that conversation.
Thank you.
Ms. Napolitano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Nelson, you detailed concerns about pilot pay. Can you explain about flight attendants' pay and where you stand?
Yes, thank you very much for that question. We have the same concerns about flight attendant pay in the regional industries, and in fact, flight attendant pay is lower than the figures that were given today for pilots. So, for example, actually sharing the panel here today, Mr. Childs, SkyWest does a better job of paying flight attendants in the regional industry, but across the board, on average, flight attendants working on regional jets under the flag of the mainline carriers and serving the same passengers are making 45% less.
Why?
And that is concerning, because they are also aviation's first responders and last line of defense in aviation security.
Why are they getting less pay?
Because of what has been described here today, which is the volatility of the regional model that is very, very tight in these capacity purchase agreements with the mainline airlines. And those agreements have not built in enough ability for these regional carriers to provide sufficient pay to the people who are working for them. Mesa Airlines is a bottom feeder on this, providing 20% less than the rest of the regional flight attendants as well. We are in the middle of a strike vote on that and trying to rectify that situation, but they also have very low work rules that include only paying for schedule. So if a flight is going from Chicago to LaGuardia and has to divert, has to hold in the air, has to stay with those passengers for upwards of 6-7 hours, depending upon what happens, they are still only paid the 2 hours that they were originally scheduled for. It's inhumane, it's got to change, and it is a problem with the general structure of the agreements between the mainline and the regional carriers, first and foremost.
Thank you. But one of the other questions that I had was the concern I have over subsidized foreign airlines in the U.S. market. I was wondering whether they have the same requirements for the pilots and for the attendants, because if they're subsidized, we don't subsidize that to the size of what they do in foreign countries. Would you have any comment about the concern this brings up and the problem with any airline and how we could address it?
We have concerns that, of course, we don't have oversight over what those airlines are doing. Correct. So in some of these countries, it is outlawed for workers to even organize, to bargain contracts, to band together, to beat back to the discriminatory practices that we have beat back over the years. If they overtake our market, we will not be able to get that back again. So for every route that the U.S. airlines have to cede, those Gulf carriers are encroaching upon the U.S. market, which is decreasing their ability to actually compete with the network structures, and ultimately will be choked out. And we won't have any say over how those workers are treated or what the safety standards are. We won't have any control over the industry that is providing service for Americans.
Well, I'd like to ask you one question, since you brought it up, of the attendants. Are the attendants and the pilots given any mental health screenings? Because you deal with a lot of crazy people sometimes. And I fly twice a week. So I've seen it all, I've heard it all, 18 years of it. Mental health is beginning to be a major problem that we should have maybe training for the pilots and for the attendants.
So mental health is certainly an issue that we deal with for our union, and having unions and having professional pilots and flight attendants who are career employees is very important. We can provide resources and structures to be able to support people throughout their careers. So we have vibrant EAP programs where we address these issues in the workplace immediately. Their peers understand that they can report any concerns that they might have, get people the help that they need sooner.
But are they trained to recognize any of the symptoms?
Our EAP committees are trained to recognize those symptoms, to report that, and all workers are advised in unionized workplaces at U.S. carriers that they have the ability to use these resources to their benefit, to report any potential problems in a confidential atmosphere, to get help to those employees, get them off the job while they need to recover, and bring them back when they are healthy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Ricchetta.
Thank you, Chairman. I thank the witnesses. Mr. Tilden, you said you're a pilot. Are you current?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, what do you fly?
I actually fly a TBM. Now I was in a Cessna 182 for a long time.
Right, there we go. So general aviation for sure.
Yes.
I appreciate that. I also appreciate you. If I understood your testimony to questions prior, that a lot of the congestion and capacity issues aren't just in the air, right? You said that's at the airport, roads going to the airport, marshaling issues. You know, we have that issue a lot of times trying to get to a gate. And in fact, don't the airlines execute their schedule such that you have departures and arrivals generally coming together at the same time so you can facilitate the movement of passengers, so you don't have to pay people at extraneous hours if you don't have to make things more efficient, which I appreciate, correct?
Yes.
So that contributes to capacity and constraints and some things as well. I also understood from your testimony, and I haven't really heard this before, I think you said it very well, look, we're looking for fast tracking of approaches.
Right.
I'm happy to work with you on that. I think that's a great idea. I'm going to have you put up approach I picked from Miami, just kind of randomly. Now, I don't know if you can read that. I don't know if we can get it any bigger. You've seen this if you're instrument rated. This is a relatively simple approach, and you can see two-thirds of the way down to the right, the profile view of that approach. And you see this is an ILS into 26 left at Miami, and you come down that approach and starting at about 3,000 feet and for the next 6-7 miles or so, it's exactly what you're talking about.
Correct.
But I think what you're saying is that you'd like to see that line continue on for 100, 150 miles out or whatever, so that you can idle the engines, which would help with sound. You can hit your numbers, hit your speeds, true up at the end if you have to, but otherwise, boom, you're in. Right?
That's exactly right. So this is an ILS approach, and an ILS has two radio beams. It's got a localizer, which is the up-down. Sorry, is the lateral beam.
I only got 5 minutes, so we're not going to do a class now.
But what you want is to get rid of that and have GPS, a curved line from altitude down to the runway end.
But not get rid of this. I don't like that, because for some of us, we use that still, because we're not coming from 30,000 feet or 200 miles away.
But it only extends 10 miles.
Right. But simple enough. I think we're on the same point. We could get it an approach for you, because we have a GPS approach that I can put up right now that would show the same thing. Within 2 or 3 years, we had GPS approaches plates pop up all over the country. They got that done. I don't see why they can't get that done for you, and I'd like to work with you on that. At the same time, I don't see why you would testify, why you need to testify, that if that's the problem, that we need to give away the national treasure that is our airspace, not even lease or sell like we did with the Indiana Toll Road for $3.8 billion, but give away the national treasure that is our airspace to facilitate that for you. I think there's just a much simpler way, and I would, Chairman, introduce, without opposition apparently, hopefully, Mr. DeFazio's poster board for the record, with unanimous consent, if I can have that. Whatever he was testifying with, I would like that in the record. Sorry.
Without objection.
Yeah, thank you. Because that's, you want to do all that Mr. DeFazio pointed out to accomplish that line getting extended 100, 150 miles out, which I completely agree with. I think perhaps the bigger problem is, maybe, not to put words in your mouth, these are mine, that once you do that, once you idle back and you set that course, and you could do this very easily, very safely, and you're hitting your numbers just like you say, you can't have anyone else get in your way, right? So if I'm flying that approach, or coming in, not on your timetable, but my own timetable, you can't, because it defeats the purpose, if you have to vector away, come back, idle back up, to hold an altitude, which is exactly what our ATC professionals are there to do, to provide safety in an environment where we all have a right to use the airspace. And you as a GA pilot, certainly in Alaska, know that we pay a gas tax, we have a right to that airspace, just like everyone else, for as much as we use of it. And it works, and it works very efficiently. So at least on the approach plate aspect of this, count me as a fan, count me as someone who wants to get you there, because not only is it the sound, you're saving a lot of money, because to run a turbine at a lower altitude is an extremely much more amount of fuel than at a higher altitude where they're designed to run.
I think we calculate 100 gallons and 1 ton of emissions per approach that's flown with this methodology.
If this is the issue, it's easily solvable. We just did it with GPS approaches all over the country. We can get there without destroying the ecosystem that is our national airspace, and where a lot of your future pilots, for both you and the regionals, are going to come from. I'll shut up.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This question is for Mr. Tilden, Mr. Childs, and Mr. Leoka. And Mr. Leoka, I'd like for you to answer first, followed by Mr. Tilden and Mr. Childs. With respect to flight pricing data, is there a legal or public interest requirement that requires that flight pricing data be public information that can be displayed or published by anybody, any entity at any time? Or, on the other hand, is flight pricing data proprietary information protected by intellectual property law, which enables the airline to control which entities can display or publish their flight pricing data? Mr. Leoka.
Thank you for the question. The airlines are common carriers, and there's a lot of law that says that all the pricing of common carriers is public information. At the same time, airlines should be allowed to operate and to sell their tickets through businesses of their choice. What we at Travelers United have been pushing for years is for the release of all of the pricing data, including airfares and ancillary fees, so that we can then put together a good shopping engine and IT professionals can put together something which allows good comparison shopping. We are not trying to take away the choice of an airline in terms of who they would like to sell their tickets through. But we are trying to find out how we can comparison shop and understand what the final cost of the product's going to be.
All right, thank you, Mr. Tilden.
So on this subject, when we advertise a fare, Seattle, Los Angeles, for example, we're required to include all the government fees and taxes in those fares as part of the advertised price. And those fees and taxes can be 20 or 25% of the ticket price. So that's done. And if we try to sell that fare over alaskaair.com or through a travel agent or whatever third-party website that might be, those fares are all represented. I think where the industry pulls back is people that are saying you're required to give us extra information on, it might be the charge for a bag or for a fruit and cheese tray, for any ancillary. And here's the important part of this, is these people all have a business model where they charge the airlines for that. And I think what we say is that that should be a commercial transaction. We should, if it's in our interest to distribute through a travel agency that uses Sabre, then we should go negotiate that transaction with the travel agency that uses Sabre and provide the information. But to be compelled to and then to have to pay the fee to the global distribution service, I guess what we're saying is we don't see the commercial value. We think that we'll actually have lower costs and lower fares for travel, and low fares is something Alaska cares about a lot through lower cost and more direct distribution.
All right, thank you, Mr. Tilden. Mr. Childs.
Yes, I'd echo what Mr. Tilden said. We do not, within our business model, in any way distribute any of the sales of the tickets. We don't do any advertising. We don't do any of that. We just make contracts with these the major carriers to fly from point A to point B. So for us, it would be not necessarily part of our business model, or I wouldn't be able to have a good say about it.
All right, thank you. Mrs. Nelson, in your written testimony, you mentioned that the United States lags behind other countries in equalizing rest regulations. As you noted, the committee included a provision requiring a 10-hour rest between flight attendants' duty days and fatigue risk management plans in last year's FAA reauthorization. How would these requirements help create equality with other countries on flight attendant rest?
Thank you very much for the question. What ICAO has done is set standards that say that the flight deck and the cabin crew should have equalized rest, and has been very prescriptive about that, and was very clear about that in 2009. What changed is when 117 went into place, FAR 117 for the pilots, the minimum rest moved to 10 hours minimum rest. And the flight attendant rest regulations got left behind, even though we had participated in, at the same time, fatigue studies commissioned by Congress that concluded that flight attendants needed more rest in order to avoid fatigue. So including the 10 hours minimum rest and a fatigue risk management plan that will help flight attendants identify when they are tired, how to avoid being tired, and how to stay rested longer is critical to ensure that we do not have flight attendants who are serving as aviation's first responders fatigued in our aviation system. It's a critical safety issue, and I want to thank the committee again for making this a top priority. And I also want to note that we have a leader in the industry at the table. Alaska Airlines actually does better than this. So there are some carriers who have negotiated better contracts, but we need to raise the standard across the industry because the 8 hours that are in place today are simply not enough to avoid fatigue.
Thank you. Now you're back.
Thank you. Mr. Leoka, how would you rate the performance of the DOT consumer protection efforts?
DOT's consumer protection efforts, when I first came to Washington back in 2009, were excellent. We had several big changes in terms of increasing the compensation for lost luggage, delayed, and damaged luggage. We had increases in the denied boarding compensation. They began with the tarmac delay rules, and we also have the full fare advertising rule that came into effect. And on top of that, the 24-hour rule, where if you make a mistake, you can go back and you've got up to 24 hours to cancel your flight. Over the last 4 years, the Department of Transportation has been doing an awful lot of studies and rulemakings, and I've filed literally hundreds of pages of comments. However, nothing has really changed. So at this point, we're at a situation where the system is operating. As you heard from my testimony, I still don't feel that consumers can adequately comparison shop and to know what the full price of the product that they're buying is. There's no way today for anybody to say, I'm traveling with my wife and 2 kids, we're going to carry on 4 bags and check 2 bags, and we're going from New York City to LA. You cannot get the total price, including check bags, assigned seats, and airfares. It doesn't exist. And that's something which we need to get around to, and eventually we will, because it will help everybody. Competition is what makes these systems work. And without competition, without having the pricing and the data available to everyone, the system just won't change.
Thank you. For Mr. Tilden and Mr. Childs, Mr. Westerman touched on this, and it may be purely economics, but I represent Atlantic City Airport. We have a 10,000-foot runway. We were a backup for the shuttle when it was in operation. We have a new, very modern terminal. We're in fairly close proximity to Philadelphia, which is bursting at the seams with trying to figure out how to expand. And maybe it's just economics, but the South Jersey Transportation Authority and actually the New York Port Authority, which is now the operator for the airport, we're just searching for like the same thing Mr. Westerman was searching. Do you have any advice for an airport like ours of how to attract additional?
You know, what we've seen on the West Coast, what Mr. Child said, I think airports have had outreach efforts. They come talk to airlines like Alaska, and I think when they work with the airline and they commit that an airline brings in service, we're going to try to get people on the flight. We've done that in many cases, and often it works. Often the community says, bring new air service to us. We bring the new air service. They get people out, support the air service, and it works. So that's a bit of advice I would have. The other thing I would just add is the system is fantastic. I mean, it works really, really well, but a lot of the things we've been talking about today, it just costs money to fly an airplane well and safely and pay people the way you want to pay them and so forth. So what you have seen, and Chip has been speaking to this, is that the smallest airplane size you see has gone from 9 seats to 19 seats to 28 seats to now really the smallest airplane you see, much of it all, is about a 50-seater. And I don't know what to do about that. I don't have any great idea. It just may be that to fly the way we want to fly and need to fly, that's about the size that you're going to see sort of commonly used. And to the other congressman's questions, in certain markets where they are really remote, maybe essential air service with some help from the government is how you prop up those service in some of those locations.
Yeah. Anything different, Mr. Childs?
Yeah, I may sound like a broken record a little bit here today, but the reality is if there is not enough pilots, and some of the statistics that I read earlier are real, if you're trying to get new service the way you're talking about, it's very, very difficult unless we solve this pilot solution through the means in which we've talked about, because that enables you to have a conversation. We talk about communities losing service. We talk about communities getting service. A lot of this has to be solved by this pilot situation that we need help with.
Ms. Nelson, you were very articulate about the rest hour, and at least some of us hope that becomes a reality. But In addition to that, is there anything that we should be looking at that would be on a top priority list for you that we have not asked about that you think should be included or we should be looking at?
Thank you very much, Chairman Lobiando. Our top priority is the 10 hours with the fatigue risk management plan. We also appreciate the work of this committee and would continue to support some of the items that were in last year's bill, which include a review of evacuation standards, no knives on planes, and I'm trying to look for the list of the rest. But we would really implore this committee to continue with the 10 hours and the fatigue risk management plan and to take very seriously your job with the oversight of the industry and enforcing these trade agreements, enforcing these open skies agreements, and addressing the issue of the flag of convenience model in aviation. We believe that that is the top concern for our members, and we hope that that will be addressed this year.
Okay, very well. Mr. DeFazio, do you have anything else?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Haight, the Trump administration has recently put a hold on an FAA rule to harmonize the United States with the ICAO lithium battery transport requirements. ICAO determined that the risk is such that there should be no commercial transport of lithium batteries on passenger aircraft whatsoever. And then secondly, they imposed requirements upon packaging and charge and other things for freight transport. And do you support the ICAO rules?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
The harmonization is key to us.
Right. So I'm hopeful that the Trump administration will withhold or will withdraw their delay in that rule. I mean, what they've said is, well, we know we'll have voluntary compliance. I'm always concerned with voluntary compliance because there's always some low-budget person out there who's saying, to heck with that, I'll take your stuff. So you think if we set this floor, we're going to be much better off because everybody has to follow the same rules?
That's correct.
Okay. And then to Mr. Tilden or Mr. Childs, I would assume you support the ICAO position that the commercial transport at this point in time is too hazardous and would not want to see that, again, someone is transporting commercially on passenger aircraft.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Childs?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Well, hopefully we can get that straightened out with the administration. So, wow, okay. I had asked a question, Ms. Nelson, your testimony was great, and I mean, one thing that came to my mind was if we're contracting for pilots around the world, what standards would they have been trained under and what number of hours would they have? And then, of course, there's the additional problem of this, the Malaysian flight that we still haven't found. So I'm not anxious to be having Malaysian pilots in the near future. And the staff found that ICAO says 200 hours of flight time or 150 if completed during training is the pilot standard. So when we start looking at this contract model, it's likely that your people are going to be flying overseas in, complicated large aircraft with someone who's got 201 hours of time. That's great. I do know in India, in fact, there were people who got certificated who had never, ever even flown a simulator, let alone a plane. It was a bit of a scandal, and they got their certificates pulled, but it did happen. So I just want to thank you for raising those issues, and I don't think we should be asking U.S. airlines to compete with countries that only require 200 hours and to meet the minimum ICAO standard. I would have a tremendous concern about that. Would you, Mr. Leoka, have a concern in terms of consumer protection of having people fly on planes with pilots with that little experience?
The international airline system as it's running right now, is probably the safest that it's ever been in history. And if we keep doing what we're doing and we have basically no fatal crashes for a long time, I think that we're on the right track.
Okay, that was a little equivocal. I would say we still haven't found that Malaysian flight. So I have concerns about chasing cheapest labor around the world. I've spent a lot of time on cruise line issues and domestic maritime issues, and nobody wins in a race to the bottom, which is where we've taken things particularly with flags of convenience. There was a great 60 Minutes piece about 15 years ago on flags of convenience and what it means for passengers, rape, murder, whatever. You go to the Liberian courts if you were on the high seas. Ship gets hijacked, call the Liberian Navy. You know, I do not want to see something like that happening to the airline industry, and this model will take us in that direction. With that, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for the time and yield back.
Thank you, Mr. DeFazio. I'd like to thank our panelists here today. I think this was very productive. I'd like to remind everybody we are looking for your ideas. Transport feedback at mail.house.gov. And this hearing stands adjourned.